balloon, he vacuum, he pink cartoon, he harbinge doom. Today we're kicking off a renewed character design spotlight series focusing on famous characters, and who better to start with than the classic Nintendo character Kirby. Let's see what we can learn from him. I am a huge fan of not just Kirby, but the overall aesthetic and world building of his universe. Kirby is a series that seems exclusively bright and cheery on the surface, and while that holds true for the most part, there's actually quite a bit more than most people realize once you get below the surface. In fact, that's sort of a running theme with this franchise. Simple at first, complex underneath. Kirby was created by Masahiro Sakurai, initially for the Game Boy. Kirby's Dream Land is a simple story about greedy King Dedede stealing all the food in Dreamland, which, by the way, is on planet Popstar. It's up to Kirby to get the food back. This central conflict is similar to Mario freeing the princess from Bowser, Sonic freeing the animals from Dr. Robotnik, or Crash Bandicoot saving the island and Tawna from Neo Cortex. Imagine, though, that in subsequent adventures you realized the scope of this universe extended far past Bowser's tyranny, that Robotnik was chump change, that Crash was an omnipotent being merely toying with Cortex, with fish much more cosmically formidable to fry. I guess a couple of those did end up being true. Simple at first, complex underneath. As with many Nintendo properties, it's important that we focus on gameplay, as they're a company that always puts gameplay first. A well-designed character is one that fulfills its purpose and fills the role it's meant for well. A character meant to play the expressive, empathetic lead to an animated film is going to have different priorities to one meant to be quick to draw for a Sunday comic. In this case, we need a character who accentuates and communicates gameplay well. Kirby's gameplay consists of consecutive jumps where he inflates and flaps his arms? His primary mechanic involves sucking enemies into his mouth like a miniature black hole, and deciding either to spit them back out as stardust or to swallow them, thus copying their abilities. The copy power was added after the first game to give a layer of complexity to more advanced players, while beginners can still simply spit enemies back out. Simple at first, complex underneath. How do you draw Kirby? First you draw a circle, then you dot the eyes, add a great big smile, and presto, it's Kirby. His visual design is one of the simplest there is, a perfect sphere with the bare minimum appendages. Apart from being easy to integrate into the Game Boy's simple graphics, there's a lot being communicated by his design. By using exclusively round shape language, we intuit that this character is caring, childlike, harmless, and perhaps most importantly, filled with potential. Some of these things are wholly true, and others are contradicted below the surface. The simple potential of a spherical character makes his change from copyability to copyability super simple to understand. Each is a unique new hat or held item, and the same pink ball is the center of each. You also kind of get the idea that this isn't even
Kirby's final form.
Kirby shouldn't be an example that designers scoff at. He should be one that they aspire to. After all, perfection comes not from there being nothing more to add, but from there being nothing more to take away. As simple as this design is, there are some challenges the animators dealt with well. For example, having feet and arms that convey movement, action, running, jumping, dancing, and swimming across what is essentially a ball-shaped head could be difficult. This is solved by allowing each limb to travel across the body, instead of pivoting from a set spot like our shoulders do. That might have made more real-world sense, and stopping to think about how Kirby's arms are just kind of coming out of his forehead mid-front stroke seems a little bit odd. But when translated to gameplay, it just feels right. I share the theory that others have expressed that instead of being external limbs, Kirby's hands and feet are internal, and manifest on the outside of his membrane when needed. One last thing about his visual design, Kirby, as he's been updated in higher resolutions, now appears to have swirling galaxies in his eyes. Now, I'm someone who loves a good swirling cosmic starfield kind of aesthetic, so that along with everything else Kirby just totally resonates with me. And speaking of higher resolution, I feel like that's another important point, is that Kirby's design has remained steadfast. Thank goodness HD consoles didn't bring us a grotesquely realistic Kirby. Realism equals better is something that gets defaulted to so often now that I am officially tired of it. People's need to validate a stylized character by bringing them into a more mature and therefore valid setting is something I will eternally crusade against. So, good on you, Kirby. I also really want to talk about Kirby's supporting cast and world, too. You could, cut yourself on Meta Knight's edge just by looking at him. In a lot of ways, from his sword named Galaxia, which that's really cool, his glowing eyes behind a formidable mask, and a combination of bat-like wings and a dimensional cape, which that's also very cool. You could see Meta Knight as an opposite of Kirby's naive, charming, and harmless appearance. And in some ways he fulfills a role I always love in video games, that of the more advanced wanderer rival that sometimes turns mentor or tentative ally. It's present in characters like Proto Man, Zero, and Hornet from Hollow Knight. Having a separate character that acts as a more advanced version of yourself gives you something to progress towards, and having to face off against them is a satisfying victory, knowing you were the underdog going in. Meta Knight and Kirby aren't exactly friends, but they aren't always enemies either. We get hints that Kirby and Meta Knight are more alike than we realize, and there's a good chance that he's what an adult version of Kirby could theoretically be. There's a lot of things I've talked about loving in the Kirby world, but by far my favorite thing has to be his primary mode of transportation, the Warp Star. The simple, rounded star shape, the way that it gives off an exhaust of smaller rounded stars, the sound it makes, and its ability to not only speed along, but warp to other locations, makes it the perfect companion to Kirby. It's the Warp Star that helped inspire the creation of the inventive and unconventional racing game Kirby Air Ride on the GameCube. We already started to talk about King Dedede and his greed, attempting to hoard all of the food in Dreamland. He's a mallet-swinging penguin who seems a little cold, even though he's not typically in winter temperatures. King Dedede, as Kirby's antithesis of sorts, is his perfect opposite in a way. His arrogance is that he surrounds himself with pomp and ceremony, pridefully boasting control over a puny domicile, while Kirby has the humility to walk softly and quell the universe. But I love Dedede for who he is, by the way. There are so many other characters in the Kirby universe with simple but excellent character designs. Magolor, Suzy, Galactonite, Eileen, Taranza, DeRoach. In fact, the entirety of the Squeak Squad. That game has a special place for me. The story of a lot of Kirby games goes a little something like this. Everything was fine on the peaceful planet of Popstar until someone stole Kirby's hamburger. Something, 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 fight a cosmic horror. The unnerving elements of the larger Kirby galaxy is a huge part of its charm, and the fact that Kirby himself is a sort of latent force of nature in its embryonic state makes taking control of him that much more fun. After all, Kirby is a champion of the little guy. The juxtaposition of cheery, happy, childlike scenery into a world of danger and unknown power makes Kirby seem simple at first, but complex underneath. A lot of people frame the Kirby games as too easy, and even the most diehard Kirby fan will admit that they aren't the most difficult games. I like to reframe that difficulty, however. After all, for a character of such omnipotent power, what challenge is there presented by the platforming levels of mere mortals? I hope that this look at Kirby, especially if you're an artist, storyteller, writer, or creator, has helped convince you, if you weren't already, that cute, charming, simple aesthetics and deeper, compelling, complex themes aren't mutually exclusive. That's what I'm always seeking to make in my own work, and that's also the reason that you should seek out and scold that person you know who won't go see Into the Spider-Verse because they don't do cartoons and it's a kids movie. If this or any of my videos have been helpful for you, please give it a like and share it with a friend, one who already loves Kirby or hasn't had the pleasure yet. My Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and Patreon are all @BagelDenizen, and you'll see them in a few seconds. Thank you so much for watching, and have fun creating.